South African President Ramaphosa was in D.C. yesterday, and the context here, is that the U.S., the Trump administration, has shut down all refugee admissions except for white farmers that they claim are facing persecution and even genocide in South Africa. So this meeting quickly turned contentious as President Trump basically ambushed him with this whole multimedia presentation of his allegations against what his government is doing in his own country of South Africa. It also, Ryan, comes on the heels of President Trump's trip to the Middle East, where he said, we're not going to go around the world lecturing people about their human rights abuses. So
we're going to do it from here.
Yeah, we'll just do it right here when you come to visit us. So in any case, let me show you a little bit of this. And we are going to have a guest join us in a minute to break down some of the claims that are made here and what the actual reality is.
It's means tested. If you have a certain amount of money, then we will not care about your human rights.
Well, that actually comes up in this exchange at one point. We'll play you that in a minute, where the president of South Africa says, listen, I'm sorry, I don't have a $400 million plane for you. Basically saying, I guess I didn't have sufficient funds for, to really get on your good side here. In any case, let's go ahead and take a listen to a little bit of how this went down.
It will take President Trump listening to the voices of South Africans, some of whom are his good friends, like those who are here. When we have talks between us around a quiet table, it will take President Trump to listen to them. I'm not going to be repeating what I've been saying. I would say if there was Afrikaner farmer genocide, I can bet you these three gentlemen would not be here, including my Minister of Agriculture. He would not be with me.
But, Mr. President, I must say that we have, wait. We have thousands of stories talking about it. Sure. And we have documentaries, we have news stories.
Even in the parliament. And they're a small minority party, which is allowed to exist in terms of our constitution.
But you do allow them to take land.
No.
You do allow them to take land.
Nobody can
take land. And then when they take the land, they kill the white farmer. And when they kill the white farmer, nothing happens to them.
No, there is
nothing happens to them.
There is criminality in our country. People who do get killed, unfortunately through criminal activity, are not only white people. Majority of them are black people. And we have now been utilized.
The farmers are not black. I don't say that's good or bad, but the farmers are not black.
So what the president is trying to say there, Ryan, is we do have a really significant problem with violence, which is true. There are tens of thousands of murders in South Africa every year. But if you look at the statistics, it's disproportionately actually the poor, which tends to be black South Africans who are affected, but there's no indication that white farmers in particular are more subject to violence than other groups in a nation that is, again, unfortunately beset by high levels of violence.
Right, and it doesn't mean there is never racially charged violence. And I think people here in the United States people on the right might have a better time understanding this if they contextualize it within the United States. So in South Africa, there are definitely cases where black South Africans have killed white South African farmers and have used racial language when they've done so. Like, that has happened.
Yes.
There's no question about it. There are plenty of witnesses, like court cases, that has happened. Here in the United States, there have been many cases of white people who have killed black people and have used racially charged language. Also the reverse. People can argue about what the numbers are. It has happened. But nobody would say that white genocide or black genocide is going on here in the United States, just because you can find those examples. So you have to look at it holistically. So that's what I would argue to people on the right who have been convinced by seeing some examples of racial violence and have then gone from there to, oh, this is genocide.
Yeah. Why do you think Trump has become obsessed with this particular thing? I mean, there's a few things that are obvious. Number one, Elon Musk being so prominent. And not just Elon, David Sachs and some others who are close with the administration are also South African.
Tons of South African. Peter Thiel, right?
Peter Thiel, also South African, exactly. So, I mean, that seems significant because in the first administration, we did not see this same focus. There's that this is a fixation with white nationalists. You can see Stephen Miller being really into this kind of thing. I've seen all kinds of, commentary on Twitter and et cetera. The other piece is that, South Africa has been one of the leading opponents of Israel's genocide in Gaza. In fact, one of the White House, one of the things that they put out even explained that that was a piece of why they were upset with South Africa. So it's also sort of one of these like up is down, left is right situations where the very country that is standing strongest against genocide in the context of, Israel and Gaza is now being accused of committing genocide, which is, frankly, a fairly preposterous claim.
You also see some lurid arguments on the right that this is what happens if DEI goes on unchecked.
Yeah.
So they've roped it into their whole DEI
I mean, this is
argument.
in the whole sphere of people who long for the days of Rhodesia and who want to use the breakdown of, the high levels of violence in South Africa also to broadly smear Black people as unable to govern. I mean, that's where this whole argument leads into as well. So, I think there's a whole host of reasons why Trump has probably decided that this is something that he is very interested in. And I think he also just loves, it's kind of a troll, it's kind of a distraction. It's that sort of thing as well to make everybody get upset and talk about it. And the, outrageous nature of saying that this particular group is more, beset by violence or under threat than, people who helped us, our troops in Afghanistan now than the Taliban's back in power, people from other conflicts around the world, is also, just utterly absurd, which is part of why he likes it, because it upsets people like us or liberal commentary on TV or whatever so much.
Right. And so far there's been, dozens of white South Africans let in under this program?
Yes. And
it's basically open to every white South African for the most part?
Yeah.
And there are many, what's the population? Many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of white South Africans. A lot. So for, 0.000 whatever percent to take it up is not very...
4.5 million, according to...
White South Africans?
AI, yeah.
And 50 to 60 have taken him up on this offer. It's not a very strong argument for them feeling like they're facing imminent threat of genocide.
Yes, that is a good point as well. Let me play you one more clip before we bring in our guest, where the president of South Africa, anticipating that something like this was going to unfold, brought with him first, a bunch of white guys that are in his cabinet, even some of the white South African golfers. There are a number of them who are, very high level in PGA Tour, et cetera, thinking okay,
Trump loves them.
Yeah, this has got to be the way to get in good with Trump. And there's a moment here, too, that I referenced earlier where he says straight to Trump's face, sorry, I didn't have a plane to give you, indicating maybe it'd be treated a little different if I had some more gifts that I could pony up in exchange.
Maybe? Yeah, maybe?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Just maybe.
Just
so
maybe.
let's take a listen to a little bit of how that went down.
Mr. President, you welcome white Afrikaner refugees here. Can you explain to Americans why it's appropriate to welcome white Afrikaners here when other refugees like Afghans, Venezuelans, Haitians have all had their protected status revoked?
Well, this is a group, NBC, that is truly fake news. They ask a lot of questions in a very pointed way. They're not questions, they're statements. Today, I have many friends from South Africa, but many of those friends are not, they can't go back. I have, Elon is from South Africa. I don't want to get Elon involved. That's all I have to do, get him into another thing. But Elon happens to be from South Africa. This is what Elon wanted. He actually came here on a different subject, sending rockets to Mars, okay? He likes that better. He likes that subject better.
We have too many deaths, but it's across the board. It's not only white farmers. It's across the board. And we need technological help. We need Starlink at every little police station.
I'm sorry, I don't have a plane to give you.
I wish you did. I take it. I would take it. If your country offered the United States Air Force a plane, I would take it.
Okay. But coming back to this issue, which I really would like us to talk about, and talk about it very calmly. We were taught by Nelson Mandela that whenever there are problems, people need to sit down around a table and talk about them.
Well, there are
and this is
problems.
precisely what we would also like to talk about, including, of course, trade matters, investment matters. So the issues that concern you as the United States.
Those are all recent. Those are all deaths.
So he also introduces there another piece of the puzzle of why there might be this particular upset with South Africa, because Elon wants them to take up Starlink, and there's a provision that would require, I think, Starlink to be owned 30% by Black South Africans through some subsidiary in South Africa. I think those are the details, guys. You have to go and double check. But in any case, he has felt aggrieved that he hasn't been able to get South Africa to take up Starlink. And so that gets a mention there, too, of, one of the South Africans is like, we really want Starlink.
Yeah.
Is that going to make you happy with us? Because other countries around the world, that's been the way that they've greased the skids with this administration.
And Starlink would legitimately be good for South Africa, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they've had such a hard time building up the telecommunications infrastructure that now you can be like, all right, you know what? Skip all that stuff. Let's just jump to the Starlink era, the satellite era. But right, they also have rules around local ownership, and I guess that's causing problems.
Apparently, yes, apparently. And then just too on the nose that the president of South Africa says, well, I'm sorry, I don't have a plane. And Trump's like, well, if you had one, I'd take it.
Yeah. Come back when you have a plane.
There you go.
The word for that is, bribery is one, but tribute is the other. Like for tens of thousands of years, that is how emperors have operated. You pay tribute to the emperor. And you don't necessarily get anything for it, but if you don't pay your tribute, everybody knows then you're not going to get treated as well by the benevolent emperor.
No matter how many golfers you bring, apparently.
Yeah. Although the golfers are tribute also, in a way.
In a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are tribute to Trump's particular interests.
Yes.
All right, let's go ahead and get to our guests who can break down some of the more specifics here.
We are now joined by Bulelwal Mabasa, who is a land reform attorney in South Africa. And I was just saying that I reached out to her around midnight her time last night and asked her if she could be on this morning. And if she was asleep, go ahead and reach back out to us in the morning. She said, on a day like today, there's no way I'm sleeping. So what has it been like in South Africa? How are South Africans kind of responding to this unbelievable scene out of the Oval Office?
So interestingly, the responses have been varied from, commentators, intellectuals, and academics on one end of the spectrum, praising the South African team, saying that they've maintained the, moral high ground, that our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, maintained composure, and that he did not descend into the kind of, comical playing out of the meeting, and others, kind of a little bit more in the middle, saying, well, it was kind of, President Trump being President Trump. It was, kind of a 0 out of 10 for the U.S. Team, and maybe about 60 out of 100 for the South African team. And the other extreme end, which is kind of this weaponization or weaponizing Nelson Mandela's call for reconciliation, as if there is a trade-off for not transforming the country. And this kind of a begging bowl syndrome, reminiscent of the colonial era. We are the poor African country, and we need this rich superpower, and we're the small economy, and we need you to rescue us. Almost like a Messiah, to state metaphorically, almost like a savior coming down. So the reaction has been interesting from a political lens, but obviously, not being a political commentator in any way, my focus was on the land confiscation issue and how it was addressed. And that's where, and I think that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. And I wanted to play some of the specific claims that were made by the president, who I said earlier prepared this whole multimedia presentation for this meeting, and get you to address some of the specific claims that were made. This is A5, guys. If we could go ahead and play that.
Now this is very bad. These are burial sites right here. Burial sites. Over 1,000 of white farmers, and those cars are lined up to pay love on a Sunday morning. Each one of those white things you see is a cross, and there's approximately 1,000 of them. They're all white farmers, the family of white farmers. And those cars aren't driving, they're stopped there to pay respects to their family member who's killed.
Have they told you where that is, Mr. President? No, I'd like to know where that is, because this I've never seen.
In addition, there were news articles that were printed out about deaths. I know one of them actually had nothing to do with South Africa. It was from another African nation and, was completely unrelated. As you referenced before, we played earlier, there were claims made about land expropriation, and I know that is your particular specialty. So could you sort through some of these claims that were made and help us understand what's really going on here?
Yes. So the visuals around the white crosses, there isn't actually that wasn't a burial site, and with the kind of U.S. machinery, with the intelligence agencies in the U.S. being the most powerful, it boggles the mind that such an untruth could land up in the Oval Office and be presented as truth. That was a protest. In actual fact, those aren't burial sites. And there isn't, in fact, a burial site of just exclusively farm victims or victims of farm murders that exist in South Africa. And insofar as the land confiscation issue, I think what needed to be put through in that meeting is that President Ramaphosa himself was part and parcel of the negotiations that took place just before South Africa became a democracy. And he was part and parcel of a team that formulated our constitution. It was the National Party government at the time and the ANC incoming government. They negotiated into a constitution how South Africa was going to deal with its land issues. South Africa's constitution recognizes that there was a law which was promulgated in 1913, the Natives Land Act, that actually confiscated land from Black people into the hands of the white minority. Black people were dispossessed of 80% of the land that was in the hands of the 7% of the population. And if there's a historical context that grounds what our land reform policy is, we have in our constitution Section 25 that protects property rights, that says that no one may be expropriated of property and unless in terms of the law of general application, so in terms of the rule of law. But in the same section, it also says that we take into account the past historical injustices that have taken place in our country. And therefore, within that constitution, it invites the state. In fact, it's not even an invitation, it's a direct obligation to the state to say the state must take all reasonable legislative measures to ensure that we have land reform in a form of land restitution, land redistribution, and security of land tenure. So that should have been the very first kind of key message, to say our land reform project is grounded within the rule of law. It's part and parcel of our constitution. We've got a very rich judiciary where all of this is happening. Every single day, we've got a restitution program in South Africa, for example, where people can lay claim to land that they've lost previously, and they get either provided with the land or compensation. And this is probably the biggest restitution program in the world. And land transfers are happening peacefully without violence, then they are grounded within the rule of law. So I think that's probably the very key first message that South Africa could have opened up the conversation about. And that there isn't, this land confiscation is not, it's not happening. Certainly, it's not sanctioned by law. But I think also most importantly is to say expropriation that we follow in South Africa is very similar to the laws of eminent domain. in America, in fact, our laws of expropriation borrow from UK law, the laws in Germany. It's no simple, and I know in the UK it's called compulsory purchase. And so our law, which is grounded on Roman Dutch law, English law of expropriation, is no different. Even in America, there are instances, for example, where expropriation does take place for the public interest, for environmental purposes, and so forth. And this is precisely what South Africa is doing. The only difference that South Africa has, if you had to compare it with the other developed nations, is that we're also using our expropriation laws in order to make land available in line with our constitutional imperatives of transformative justice.
So this, to me, feels like the crux of the issue. Like everything else that's going on in the Oval Office there, the fake 1,000, white crosses, or the white crosses representing a fake 1,000 dead people, all the talks about white genocide, it's all a distraction, because what they really want to talk about is this underlying central conflict around land reform. And that is a real conflict. It
is a conflict.
Yeah. That's a real one. Yeah. So how does it work? So this is what you do.
Yes.
You work in this field. Who is getting expropriated, and who is the land being redistributed to as part of that process? Because I really do feel like we should just talk about it, because this is what people are really actually genuinely upset about, but they don't want to come out and say it.
Yes, South Africa's land policy is grounded on three notions. The first is called land restitution, which means that people who can prove that they were, or their descendants were dispossessed of land without compensation, that it happened after 1913, those people were able to go to the government and make land claims. And if those claims are proven to be valid, those people then could either be given the land that they lost. And sometimes if the land that they lost is no longer viable for human occupation, or it's been built up, or it's now a shopping center, they're given alternative land, or they're given compensation. That's one arm of it. That is the restitution program that I spoke about, that it started in 1994. Yes, it's been slow paced, but that's the land, one of the land reform pillars. The second pillar is land redistribution. Now, land redistribution it's also embedded in our constitution. It says the state must take legislative measures to ensure that people who need the land, who need to have access to land, are given the land. Again, the state has been slow. They haven't provided enough resources in order to ensure that the land is redistributed. I think so far, we're only speaking about 10% of the land that has been redistributed. There's been very poor fiscal support in order to see progress there. The third leg of this is the land tenure of Black people. More than 60% of Black people don't have secure tenure. What that means is that they don't have formal rights, property rights. They live in informal settlements. And this is what the Land Reform Project of South Africa is trying to correct. When it comes to expropriation is actually very simply colorblind. Expropriation is just a tool that the state uses when it needs to use land for a public purpose or a public interest. The best example we can give about expropriation that's been actually implemented is the Gautrain. We've got the Gautrain, which is a speed train that links people in public transport system. Those people were expropriated. Those people would have been Black, white, Indian, and so forth. It's actually very colorblind. It's a state tool that is used worldwide. And so the outcry around expropriation without compensation is a little bit, it's hyperbole, because even in that legislation, it tells you under what circumstances there could be nil compensation. And this way, there's abandoned buildings, you cannot track the owner, where the land is unsafe, there's a safety risk. So it's only within quite determined, easily determinable circumstances where that could happen. But in the main, we don't have an expropriation law in South Africa that promotes expropriation as a wholesale concept. In fact, when I sat as part of the Presidential Advisory Panel, we found that the democratic state has actually not even used the expropriation powers, although it's sanctioned in the Constitution. So all of this is a rather perplexing situation where actually the government has been slow to implement their constitutional obligations for land reform, and yet you find this kind of it's almost an untruth that has kind of built legs that we saw play out in the Oval House. So in the Oval Office. And so what we actually now find is that the land reform question is almost metaphorical for the need to transform South Africa's society at the heart of transformation, whether we're talking about labor, land, business, and so forth, is the need to transform our society because South Africa is the most unequal country in the world, skewed against the Black majority. We still have the economy in the hands of majority white people. We still have property rights, landowners skewed in favor, held in white hands. And so it's kind of a machinery that you kind of watch in disbelief because it couldn't be further from the truth on the ground.
And lastly, I think the other major question is that of violence. And I know the president was saying that, unfortunately, there is a high level of violence, but that violence is not disproportionately aimed at white people or white farmers. It afflicts, people of all types within the country. Could you speak to some of that and, what the numbers are, what the reality is, and what are some of the, potential sources of that violence?
Crime is skewed highly as something that mainly affects poorer communities where there is lack of policing, the service delivery where it is not as good as more the affluent parts of society. The victims of crime, and I don't have the statistics offhand, actually are poor Black people. The majority of people in prisons are Black men. And so the claim that, there's this targeting of a minority group is not borne by the facts or the evidence. And I think there was also too much said around the issues of violence and crime, which distorts the lived experience of South Africans across the racial lines. I think the South African society has progressed to such a, since Mandela became the president, the first democratic president, we have societies that are completely mixed. We live in suburbs that are multiracial. My children go to school in a multiracial school. And our society as a living in a Black woman body. I'm in a law firm with a diverse, people from diverse backgrounds. We have Black people now living in suburbia. So we've got, I think, the conversation focused on the issues of crime, which are valid issues, was a lost opportunity to sell the country that we know and love and we live in, where we've actually, and maybe in not completely, but we are the lived examples of the Rainbow Nation that Nelson Mandela spoke about. And yes, we do have issues to deal with: inequality, poverty, unemployment, and not unique to South Africa. And yes, our unemployment stats are high at 32%. But I think that South Africa still remains a viable, colorful, complex, but beautiful place to live, work, and play. And I think it was unfortunate that there was this kind of ambush and concentration around violence.
And Trump also, last question for me, Trump also in the meeting played a clip of Julius Malema singing or chanting the rap song like "Kill the Boer," which is Boer White South African. That's a clip that Elon Musk has circulated many times. It's a prominent clip, kind of on the right here in the United States. Can you talk just briefly about who is Malema, and what should people understand about this?
Julius Malema actually comes from the ANC, which is it was the majority ruling party up until the recent elections. He was then expelled. He formed part of the youth wing. He was expelled from the ANC. He formed his own party, the Economic Freedom Front. I think up until, I could be inaccurate in terms of percentages, but his party, I think, got 7% of the vote, national vote. Although that's it's in the minority, he does have quite a his majority of his membership is around the youth. But in terms of the song, the issue was dealt with by the courts, from the High Court all the way to the Constitutional Court, and it was not found to be hate speech. And there's a little bit of contextual background around that. During the apartheid era, when the political prisoners were exiled, whether forcefully or voluntarily, the societies that remained behind made up a lot of these chants. There's hundreds and thousands of them that were kind of a yearning for, one day when Mandela is released, we're going to have our freedom back. And it's quite contextual. And the literal meaning then at the time was, we're going to put up arms, we're going to revenge the white farmer or the Boer. And it is not literal. And in fact, there was a court case that AfriForum launched that was heard by the High Court. It went on appeal to other courts, and ultimately the highest court of the land found that these songs, and this song in particular, did not, it did not amount to hate speech. And I think the reason for that is that it was contextual. It was around the time. No one sings that song and goes and kills, a white farmer. And I still have songs that chants that we grew up with. Some of it goes, "We miss you, Mandela, where are you?" In fact, growing up in Soweto, there was a lot of that kind of mystery around where our political prisoners, when are we going to get freedom? So there's a context to which those songs were played, and there were the chants that were created. But our ultimate highest court in the land has opined on this to say that it doesn't form part of hate speech, precisely because of the history and the context. And in relation to Julius Malema, he's quite a noteworthy figure in a political landscape, because he did form part of the ANC, which was the ruling party. He was expelled from the youth party, and his brand of I would say he is regarded to be on the left of our political arena. But I think what's important to note as well, as correctly pointed out in the meeting or in the Oval Office, is that he enjoys around about 7%, if not less, of the national vote.
Is the context changing? You said that the context made it so that people understood it not to be literal, but in the context of now, so many international right-wing figures talking about the racial tensions in South Africa, has that overlaid a new context that is giving it new meaning? That means that it might begin to be taken literally.
It depends on the lens in which you are seeing or perceiving things. If you're a right-wing person who legitimately believes that there's this genocide and there's this land confiscation, then it plays into the hands of that. But if you are a South African kind of a regular citizen, despite whichever kind of racial or social class that you belong to, it's not something that will have any form of weight in terms of behavior or even conduct to fellow South Africans.
Got it. Interesting.
Yeah, thank you so much for helping us understand some of these different pieces. We really appreciate you taking the time, Bulelwa.
Thank you. It was great to chat to you.
Same.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.